Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Home Video Library. I'm your host Nathan B. Butler, and this is another of our top whatever videos, in this case top 5 videos, in order to sort of add some breadth and scope to the content here on the channel, as new releases are pretty hard to come by in 2023. So what we're doing this time is we're taking a look here at 5 items that I would consider must-haves for Star Wars home video collectors. And I am primarily thinking of this from the standpoint of someone in the US, although this would apply in some cases across the board. That doesn't necessarily mean these are the only things that a collector would necessarily have in their collection, but if you look around at most sort of serious, if you want to call it that, Star Wars home video collectors and what they have in their collections, there are a few things that are sort of like the standbys to have in those collections that sort of form some of the core items, you could say. Things will vary as you get away from the core, from collector to collector, but when it comes to things that pretty much you're going to see as mainstays, these would be it, hence calling them must-haves. Not must-have because they're the most awesome, but must-have because they tend to be the most common as the core of most Star Wars home video collections. The order here may vary. I'm not entirely sure that the order here really matters for these 5, but we'll do it as a top 5 anyway. So starting us out at number 5, it's the UK Definitive Collection VHS Set from 1995, also known oftentimes as the Executor Set, because it is basically set up in a container as if it is a package from the Executor, from the Super Star Destroyer. Fun stuff, obviously, in here. You've got your bits and pieces, you've got some books and some art, but of course this is the one, and mine has a lot of damage to the plastic around it. This happens a lot. You have your cassettes here for the 3 original trilogy films, and underneath them you have From Star Wars to Jedi, The Making of a Saga. These are nice because, among other things, the VHS cassettes have the behind-the-scenes specials with them, some bonus stuff, lots of, art prints, complete scripts, just a really nice package. The reason why I don't put this higher up on the list is because this is something that's only going to be useful if you have a PAL VHS player. So for a lot of collectors, this is something that they really want to hunt down. It's one of the first sort of rarer, more elaborate items that enter a lot of Star Wars home video collectors' collections, but it's not necessarily going to be useful in a lot of regions. And the primary focus of this series has been US releases, in which case if you're in the US, you'll need an all-region player to be able to make use of the cassettes. Still amazing as a product, though. Number 4, I'll probably get some pushback on, but for me it was the first, or one of the 2 first Star Wars home video items I ever owned, and I see it as a mainstay in a lot of collections, as it was the first time you could get widescreen versions of the original trilogy in the US. Just on VHS, it was the first for VHS. We have the Special Letterbox Collector's Edition with that holographic cover. This is the one that if you open it up, you've got cassettes there, widescreen cassettes for the 3 original trilogy films. You've got a copy of From Star Wars to Jedi, The Making of a Saga. You got a little abridged version of George Lucas' The Creative Impulse and so forth. A nice little package here. Again, for me, I think this is something we see as a mainstay in a lot of collections, but oftentimes it gets forgotten in the case of looking between this and more elaborate releases like the Executor Set. But definitely something I would consider a mainstay of most collections, especially in the US. But you can't go too far with box sets without talking about my number 3, which is one that you'll find in many home video collectors' collections as a mainstay, and that is the Definitive Collection, the LaserDisc Set. From there's various regions that had it. The US had this one. Japan had a couple of different versions of it, and their original version actually had a dust jacket on the George Lucas The Creative Impulse full book that's in there, whereas the US version doesn't have a dust jacket. This is, of course, the same version, essentially, of the films as for the 1995 THX Remastered Edition. The remastering was done for this set. These are CAV discs as opposed to CLV. You get some bonus features to go with it. Just really nice cuts of the films. Although, if you're going through, there are some issues with some of the sets that were out there originally, like some missing minutes, or missing seconds, not minutes, missing seconds from when Leia is welding before Han comes in and they kiss and The Empire Strikes Back and all that. But still, one of the best and most well-respected of the box sets of any kind for Star Wars over the years, and certainly sort of the pinnacle of where in terms of bonus features especially, the LaserDisc library went in the US and elsewhere for Star Wars. LaserDisc would last in Japan a little longer than in the US, but as far as mainstays go, this tends to be the must-have for a lot of Star Wars home video collectors. My number 2 is going to be something some might argue should be higher up on the list, or something like further back, I guess I should say, on the list, because it's not as hard to find as some of the other ones, and that is the 2006 DVDs. Whether they're inside the case here from Best Buy or they're out there individually, just having any copy of those that includes the 2004 DVD cuts of the films and the supposed unaltered editions, which are the closest thing to actual unaltered editions that you can get on a format that will play in a modern player. For any of those, I say any of those because they're sitting on the floor next to me because they're so freaking huge they won't fit on the desk. For any of the ones I mentioned previously, you need either a working VHS player or a LaserDisc player, or in one case an all-region player if you're in the US, which is not necessarily going to be like something everybody has. Whereas a DVD player, DVDs can play in computers, they can play in Blu-ray players, and so on, game systems. So, generally speaking, this is going to be one you're going to see pretty much everywhere, either in this form or the individual packages that are still somewhat sought after because of those so-called unaltered editions that we know aren't really unaltered. They're basically just the definitive collection with a swap out of the opening of A New Hope slapped onto a DVD with some kind of compression stuff going on with it. So not the greatest versions of watching the originals, but a handy version to do so. You'll tend to see that in most home video collectors' collections. In fact, usually it's one of the early things these days that tend to go into a collector's collection, unless they're initially focusing on a specific format like VHS. And then, of course, what else would be number 1 as something that is a mainstay of the Star Wars home video library for most collectors, but the video rental library editions? Though usually beta is found less commonly within those collections. So let's put that one aside. Typically, the VHS 1982 US Video Rental Library Edition is considered sort of not only the first time, of course, that it was released in full in the US on VHS, but something sort of like the cornerstone, the foundational stone, whatever you want to call it, the bedrock of a Star Wars home video collector's collection, because it is sort of the jumping off point. Now, we know there were releases before that, like Making of Star Wars back in '79 on VHS and on beta. But just what this is, its place within the Star Wars home video evolution over the years, how it fits into its time, the unique aspect of the whole rental-only thing, how it compares to the later releases, all the lifetime rental aspects that go with the backstory of this. A very storied release, so to speak. That makes this definitely, I think, the number 1 item that we will typically find in the collections of a serious, so to speak, Star Wars home video collector. It's one of the early things to hunt for, and finding one in good condition can take a little bit of time, but thankfully they're not impossible to find, though prices tend to be getting higher as we go along here with the current VHS craze. So yeah, you tell me, is there anything I missed? What do you think should be in the top 5 things that any Star Wars home video collector will likely have in their collection? Again, the must-haves, not because they're the coolest, but because they are the mainstays for the vast majority of collections out there. If you only had 5, would you agree with mine? Or are there any you would remove and replace with something of your own? Let me know in the comments. I'd be curious to hear what you think here. When limited to 5, it's a little tough to narrow these down. I think these 5 to me are the ones that stand out as the strongest mainstays out there. With that, we'll wrap up this episode, though. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the home video viewers.